Alright, here we go with the third part of Chapter 6. We're going to talk about transportation and travel. Now remember, this is in the context of if you're self-employed. Normally, if you're employed, you don't get to deduct any travel or any transportation. The only way you can get any benefit from it is if you get reimbursed. So this is only for folks who have their own businesses that this applies to. Okay, so for local transportation, so this is basically just traveling around town. Not commuting. Alright, so commuting is from home to like normal workplace. So from your home to the office, if you do that every day, that none of that counts. Now, and then also coming back, like any round trip commuting doesn't count. Now, if you office out of your home, and then you have to drive out from your home to meet a client, and your home is like your main place of officing and your main place of work, then yeah, the mileage from or transportation from your house to the clients or any other temporary work sites will work. Also, if you do any traveling after you initially get to the office, if you office away from your home, any mileage incurred, any transportation costs from the office to other intermittent places other than your home, that would count. Okay, so that's the as far as transportation, we're mainly focused on mileage and parking. And the business mileage rate per mile normally fluctuates between 50 and 60 cents. Okay, like right now I think it's like 57.5 cents a mile or 58.5 cents a mile. So it's fluctuated in the past few years between 50 and 60 cents. When gas went up super high several years ago, was the gas rate was high, the mileage rate was high, and then it came back down after gas went back down. But that's how it kind of moves. The IRS will kind of tweak it up and down for inflation or gas prices. So basically those are your two choices when taking transportation, like on your own vehicle. So like if you do taxis or Uber, okay, those would be fine, like as far as the transportation cost. But if you're operating your own vehicle for business, your choices are either to do mileage or you can do actual operating costs, which would be oil changes, gasoline, and things like that. And normally it's not worth it to keep track of gasoline and all that. Normally it's a lot easier, and normally it's about the same tax benefit, if not better, to do the mileage rate and just keep a mileage log of everywhere you travel. That's the easier way to do it. So that's local. Now for travel, and they have a nice little graphic on page 22 in the book, or Exhibit 6-4, that you can look at if you want to see where you can deduct transportation costs and day trips. Let's see, automobile expenses, so we talked about that. Standard mileage rate, actual car expenses. They have this luxury limit. Okay, so vehicles is one of those other areas that has been historically abused. So they have limits on luxury vehicles, and they talked about it in the depreciation section. They called it listed property. So I'll let you go through and read that. But it just basically has some limits, some caps on how much you can deduct on the luxury vehicle. I believe we've already talked about meals and entertainment, and one of the problems we worked. Just remember, meals and entertainment is limited to 50% as far as how much you can deduct. And the guidelines are, this is stuff you're going to be doing out with clients. Like you take a client out to lunch, y'all discuss business and things like that. So it's actually a business lunch, where y'all go out and do stuff on the town. But remember, entertainment no longer applies, beginning in 2018. But the meals you can still deduct, but only up to 50%. Now, if you have a meal for your business, and it's either open to the public, or it's like for over half of your employees, then I think it's fully deductible. Okay. All right. So let's see. Business use of home, I believe we talked about that. So for home office, I think we talked briefly about it in a previous video, but let's expand on that a little bit. So the home office deduction, it's normally going to be based on square footage. So the office and your home square foot, just put that. Divided by the entire home square footage. Okay, apart from the allocation of the square footage of the office divided by the entire home, it's got to be an area of your home that's exclusively for business, so it can't be like a mixed use area where your kids come and play with their toys and stuff. It's got to have like your desk and your equipment, and you're only in there doing business stuff. You're not Airbnb-ing it and other things like that, like on the side. As far as the expenditures associated with your home that would be multiplied by this allocation, you have to do the expenditures in a certain order. So let's go ahead and do a new page here. So first thing are normal itemized deductions. So those are things on your home that you would get to deduct anyway, even if you didn't have the home office. So that would be your property taxes on your home, and then your mortgage interest. Okay, second would be operating expenses except for depreciation. Okay, so those are things you would not get to deduct if you didn't have the home office. So those are things like your utilities, repairs and maintenance, and what else? Utilities, repairs and maintenance. Yeah, and insurance. There we go. So without having a home office, you wouldn't get to deduct any of those at all. And then the last thing is depreciation. Okay, so those three things in that order, and it's going to be limited to business income. All right. So whatever your profit is on the business before considering the home office deduction, that's basically the limit of the deduction. It can't go over that. And they've got some simplified methods of computing the home office deduction. You can use a $5 per square foot for a maximum of 300 square feet. And then you would, on top of that, take your real estate taxes and your mortgage interest as you normally would on the Schedule A. All right, cool. They go and talk about business debts or bad debts. So with bad debt, the main thing to remember is if it's a business bad debt that arose, like, selling inventory to a customer or something like that, then you can deduct partial worthlessness on that kind of debt. Okay, if it's non-business bad debt, like you just lent somebody some money and they can't pay you back, then you can only deduct complete worthlessness. So once you determine you're not going to collect any of that debt, and it's treated like a capital loss, which is not quite as deductible, whereas this one is treated as an ordinary loss. So ordinary losses are easier to benefit from than a capital loss, and we'll talk more about those, I think, in the next chapter. Okay, casualty losses. So casualty losses are normally like if you get something stolen, some kind of disaster like a fire, storm, other natural thing. It normally happens quickly. So like, it doesn't happen slowly over time, like termite damage. Okay, that's something that very slow, or paint peeling. It would have to be something that's subtle, like a fire, storm, etc. And as far as how much you can deduct for a business casualty loss, you're going to get a loss of the basis. So the loss amount equals basis of the property. So remember, basis is kind of like your cost. So that's with complete destruction. Okay. So if it's completely destroyed, you use the basis of the property. Now for partial destruction, that is going to be the lower of, or the lesser of, the decrease in fair market value, or the basis. Okay, so basically you take, okay, how much was it worth before the disaster, how much is it worth after the disaster? And then you would look at that and compare it to the basis, and whichever one of those is lower, that's what you would deduct. And then of course you would reduce any of these losses as far as how much you can deduct by any insurance proceeds you collect from an insurance company if it's insured. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and upload this one, and then we will move on to the next topic.